Welcome to In a Nutshell, the podcast dedicated to all things agricultural consulting. I'm Dylan Brush here with soil genius and ag consultant Bill Brush, and we're delighted to accompany you on this journey where we break down the different aspects of agricultural consulting. In each episode, we'll dive into the realm of agriculture through the eyes of Bill Brush, where consultants like Bill play a vital role in empowering farmers, agribusiness, and agricultural organizations. If you're passionate about agriculture, problem solving, and enjoy a little bit of detective work, this podcast is tailor-made for you.
Hi, and welcome back to In a Nutshell. This is Bill Brush, and today I'm going to talk about a really specific but really broad-reaching topic, and it's about how to grow any crop, which is a big, broad topic. But when you talk about growing any crops, think about anything and everything you could grow, but stopping for a moment before we do anything and find out a lot about the crop I'm planting and what are the characteristics I need to do and how do I fertilize it, where's it going to be best, where's it not going to be good at all, and all these other things that go into making a decision on how to grow this crop and have it be the most successful for what you want to do. And I always start with where you're at and understand what environment is needed. Well, what do I mean by environment? I'm talking about how hot is it? And I don't just mean how hot an absolute temperature of any one day or a period of temperatures. I'm talking about when does it get hot? When am I trying to grow this crop? And then how can, I be most successful? There is a lot of vegetables that are grown down in the desert, Yuma area, and some of the valleys down there in California. Okay, they're grown in the wintertime, though, a lot. You'll see some done in the summer, but in the stifling heat of the summers, they don't do as well. But it is a place where they have a nice temperate, really nice warm climate in the wintertime, and a lot of the Salinas area, the central coast area that we have here that are nice to grow vegetables during the spring, summer, and into the fall, not very good because of the damp, cold conditions that we get in the wintertime over there. So again, same crops, different ideas, looking at heat as being a decisive thing as to whether it would be successful to do it then, or should I be planning it now, or should I just be waiting until I get to the more temperate temperatures later on? On the other side of heat is, guess what? Cold. And again, when is it getting cold? And then how cold does it get? Some crops cannot stand any frost temperatures at all. A good example is if you're in a climate that has a frost or freezing condition 3 or 4 times a year, you will never ever be able to grow avocados there because they can tolerate 0 freezing temperatures. So you're not in an area that you're going to be successful. So why are we trying to plant a crop that's out of place? And then how many days of cold do we get? Is it just one event? Is it an occasional event? Those can change things, particularly if you're going to plant something like a permanent crop. You're taking a flyer on an annual crop, you may get by with it. But if you're going for a permanent crop, chances are you're not going to be doing that very well. Next, rainfall. And again, it's not just how much, it's when it falls. Here in California, if you're trying to grow almonds, or in other places in the world where they do grow almonds, one of the things is, does it rain during the months of February, March, April, when the crop is having to be as clean from rainfall as possible? Yeah, it can tolerate some. Again, sometimes it's the amount and the number of frequencies of days that will get you on that. And disease are very prevalent in those wet conditions because it's not super cold, but that allows fungal diseases to run rampant. The other thing that happens too is when you get colder temperatures and a crop that needs to be pollinated, we don't get good bee flight hours, so we don't get very much pollinated. Also, when we have saturated soils, we don't move nutrients from the roots to that tremendous draw of energy to put leaves, pollination, setting the nuts, and then growing the nuts out in about a 60-day period. When you put periods where it can't gain any water, it doesn't gain any nutrition, and you're going to have some shortages, and the crop will respond by dropping a lot of the nuts and not having the crop that it could have. Also, when you're looking at the environment, how much water do I have? What are the crop requirements for the crop I'm trying to grow? And if I need, we'll take an example, I need 3 acre-feet of water to grow this crop, and I get, only 6 inches of rain, then I'm going to need to have 2.5 acre-feet of water to subsidize or substitute to be able to make that 3 acre-feet. If I'm in areas where I have 36 inches of rain, which is 3 acre-feet, guess what? If it's not in the right time, it doesn't help me, and I have to even have more than 3 acre-feet. So it's understanding how much water you have for that. And throwing also in there, if you have a real sensitive crop, vegetables is a really one that comes to mind. They do not tolerate chloride iron. They have a tendency to want to burn and not be able to tolerate hardly any chloride at all. And that being the case, if you have that in your water and don't have any way to substitute for that, you're in a point where a lot of these vegetable crops won't do well there. You can do some things in your garden, and you can do little here and there, but understand these are all parameters that you'll need to have in your thought process. If you're farming out there, the labor that's required for planting, cultivation, and harvesting. Do you have ample amount of labor that's trained and skilled in these particular crops? It may sound great to plant a crop that's never been grown there, but then I don't have anybody in that area that's ever worked with those crops in the labor field that knows how to do the proper cultivation and may never have harvested. And is it a mechanical harvest or is it a hand harvested? All these things come into play when you're making this decision on how am I going to grow this crop.
Now Bo's going to get into talking about why it's important to know your climate when trying to grow a crop.
It's part of your environment, but I call it more into climate. Is it consistent? Do you have normally the same amount of rainfall? Or are you feast and famine? One year it's huge rainfall, the next year it's hardly any, and you never know what to expect. The other part of that, of course, is how humid is it? Some crops don't like humidity. Some crops demand humidity. And here in California, we grow tons of soybeans, lots and lots and lots of soybeans, particularly in the Midwest. They have a higher humidity. In California, it's a dry heat here in the Central Valley, and we grow 0 soybeans because they need a certain amount of humidity to keep those pods pliable for when they get to harvest. Here, the pod dries out completely because it's so dry, and when we harvest, most of the soybeans are harvested before they even get to the harvester. So you have to have humidity for some crops. Some crops we want almost 0 humidity because of the disease they present. So know your climate, know what the positives and negatives of humidity and dry.
Now Bill's going to get into talking about the importance of knowing the length of season of the crop you're trying to grow.
Next, what's the length of season? How many good days or how much sunshine do I need? How many degree days or heat units do I need to mature this crop? If the area I have does not have them, then the length of the season is not sufficient enough. The heat units are not enough. The extra heat units are too much. Take all of those things into play because you won't be successful. A good example is we grow a lot of corn in the U.S., and one of the things as we go north, the number of growing degree days we need is less and less. We need more for the longer season corns. We can't really put them up into these colder areas because of the much shorter growing degree days that they get up in those areas. So we have to come back and we have to evaluate that, and when we pick the proper hybrid to pick the proper climate and that length of season that they're going to be. One of the reasons that you don't see almonds grown in many, many places around the world is its length of season. It takes 9 months from bloom to the end of harvest. 9 months of hardly any rainfall. Just brief bits early and maybe late, but most of the time you want it rain-free. frost-free on the front end and much into the season. You have to have sufficient amount of water. You have to have, so all of these things stack up to make the almond trees very difficult to find that proper climate. And that's what I say when you're trying to grow any crop. You need to be evaluating all of these characteristics before you do that. Next is understand what you want your plant to do and what the plant's trying to focus on. Is it a vegetative crop? Is it a reproductive crop? What do I change from one to another? What kind of nitrogen sources do I want to use for vegetative crop versus reproductive crop? And somewhere in my time schedule here, every plant is going to want to reproduce itself. Knowing that, we need to have the proper amount of time and the proper amount of nitrogen in at the right time to prevent that from happening. I know when we get into cold, wet conditions over in the coastal valleys and we're trying to grow vegetables of different type, and there's some ammonium-based fertilizers in there, we can cause those vegetables to bolt, which means go to seed, because what you get there is it's looking at we don't have enough time to stay vegetative and get bigger and bulk up more, so we have to take that energy and take it into reproductive form and make a seed head, and that is not what we want on cabbage and head lettuce and those kind of crops. So it's very important that we know what our weather type is like, and we can then choose the proper form of nitrogen. We look at how long the growing season is, back to that, when we're looking at what that crop can do. And if we need something that needs a super long season and we don't have it, then no matter what we do, it won't be successful there. The crop will always try to reproduce itself, and if it's got a shorter growing season, it'll just produce less crop because it's going to put all of its energy for a short period of time into that. Production is the name of the game. It won't be successful because it'll have to compete against those areas that do a good job of producing the crop at high volumes. Does my plant grow fast, or does it take a long time to mature, or does it grow slowly and mature relatively fast? We have both of those. I can tell you two nuts that we grow in California: almonds, pistachios. Almonds are a racehorse on the front end. They come out, they bloom, they push leaves, they push the hull, the shell, the nut, everything. It happens in about 60 days. And then the rest of it is a long maturity. When you get to a pistachio, it comes out a little later, slowly. It gets pollinated. You can tell it, those that don't get pollinated fall off, but they'll form on that bunch like rachis, and those that pollinated sit there, and it'll start growing and it'll mature and grow a shell or whatever. And then it has a relatively quick maturity of the actual nut, the seed itself at the end. It'll grow very rapidly. And so if you're not fertilizing for these events, you're not going to get the successful type of crop and volume of crop you're trying to get. Another one is it's corn. Anybody that's ever grown corn, they say I can almost watch it grow. It's very, very fast on the front end. You're planting it from a seed, and it grows to a plant that's 10, 12, 14 feet high, in somewhere around 90 to 100 days. And then you have some maturity that happens after that, and maturing the grain, pollinating, and all of that. So all of its reproductive comes on the tail end, not the beginning. It grows a major plant, and then starts to push out your leaves, then your ears, and then after that point, then you do the maturity. So again, how it works and what it does is how you have to fertilize it. Is it an annual crop? A perennial crop? Is it planted by a seed, or is it planted with a transplant? All of these make a tremendous difference on what you want to do. If you have a perennial crop, it's a little bit different. You're trying to fertilize at phases. You're trying to get nitrogen. Say, and I'll go back to, I talk a lot about almonds because I have a lot of them in my area, but they also are a really good surrogate to tell you how to explain what I'm doing. But when it comes out, It's growing rapidly, and so we need a lot of nitrogen on the front end for cell division, energy for the plant to push out as much bloom and to get as many set as we could, and then start to grow leaves and that. So if we're slow getting nitrogen there, we're going to have a hard time getting the type of production that we're looking for. So when we're looking at perennial, which means they're going time and time again, how much you starve a crop the year before will directly affect how it comes out the next year. So we want to make sure we've kept them fed all the way through harvest, and then a post-harvest application to fill that bucket up in that plant just before it goes dormant for when it comes out in the spring. That's one way to look at it. If it's an annual, we're looking about getting either a seed or a transplant. And what do we do? What's the difference there? Well, a transplant's partly grown, and you're shocking it by taking it from one medium and actually putting it into a field and then saying, let's grow. So a lot of things you want to do is to give it some nutrients and also some products that can help it stand that, what we call transplant shock. And most good nurseries will have a water transplant water that we actually put with them to help do these things. But the other side of that is then we're trying to get those roots stimulated to grow. Any direct seeded crop, and there's plenty of those too, you want to get them to establish a root system as soon as possible. We have a seed, and we need to immediately start to push that seed, have roots to gather nutrients and moisture, and then push that plumule, the portion of that's the vegetative, and push it and get out so it can begin photosynthesis. So we need to do that all rapidly, and we can do that if we can get early root development. And that's a real tremendous function of phosphate. So in a direct seeded situation, you want phosphate very, very close to where that emerges. And once it emerges from that seed, we want it into phosphate. Because once it gets into phosphate, the plant will respond by having a root flush everywhere it finds phosphate. And you can easily establish a pretty vigorous, fibrous root system in a short amount of time if we have enough phosphate and we can get into it. You must be careful with some of these products because if they are planted too close to those tender roots, they can cause a little bit of burn back, and actually in some places so much, if you've got too much fertilizer there, that will kill it. So a lot of times the classic way you used to plant corn seed is down 2 inches, over 2 inches, and that gives it enough time for that root to get toughened up enough to actually get into that and not be cut back by it. But it's close enough where it can get into phosphate very early. So we've got seed transplants, and then we have long-term plantings. And another perennial I didn't want to leave out is something like alfalfa, even though everybody looks at it as an annual crop because it comes out and we cut it multiple times. It's still going to be back in for at least 4 to 5 years, and in some places 8 to 10 years, depending on your dormancy and where you're planted and how long it's dormant. But even it is wanting to try to reproduce sometimes throughout the year, and it's always good to let it probably do that. But that's another perennial that you have to be growing all the time, because it's cutting, harvesting, regrow, cut, harvest, regrow. And in my country, that can be 7 or 8 times here. You get back in a little colder conditions where they don't emerge quite as early, it might be 4 or 5. And way north, it might only be 2 or 3. So again, understand what I have, what it's trying to do, and how I can make it do what I want. Another part that seems like it should be obvious, but if you treat all plants the same, just think of what part of the plant that's growing do I want? What is the harvestable portion of the plant? Is it a root crop? Potatoes or turnips or carrots, beets, onions, radishes, many more besides the ones I named, but those are root crops. So we're most worried about the roots, okay? How about the fruits and seeds, which is things like peaches, apricots, and all the stone fruits, all the berries, all the nut crops, tomatoes, the grains, melons, and many other crops. Those are fruiting crops that we want to harvest the actual reproductive body of that plant, and so that's a different type of fertilization. How about flowers? A lot of it is landscaping, okay? So if you want roses or shrubs or any of your ornamental flowering plants that you have in there, it needs to get treated a little bit different. And if you want spectacular blooms and spectacular colors, there's certain nutrients that you can put on to achieve that. Or what if you just want the vegetative portion, the leaves, the cabbages, the cauliflowers, although cauliflowers, you're actually eating part of the reproductive head, but you don't want it reproductive yet. That will actually bloom in that cauliflower. But alfalfa is another one will bloom, but you're mostly looking for the vegetation. Lettuce, kale, even your lawn. These are all vegetative crops. And again, at some point they will go reproductive, but most of these we're trying to harvest them at a vegetative state. Okay, so we're talking about why and what these crops do and what they need. I talked a little bit about just a second ago about roses. And if you want beautiful roses, they need to have a lot of potassium. They also need a nice mix, not too much, obviously, but sodium also can give you brilliant colors. And the other thing that can is a good dose of phosphate will also help give you some deeper, richer colors. And of course, a lot of the micronutrients, and it's different for different types of flowering crops, but it's always good to give a nice overall general blend of all the micronutrients, and it can have a really different effect on the color and how vibrant and how beautiful those can be. In other things where you're looking at different colors in, say, a table grape, where you've got some color that you really want to express, like it can come out as a light, but we really want it dark red. That takes some of these same additional colors we're talking about, potash or potassium, phosphate, a little bit of sodium, unless you have high sodiums. And then some people, it's kind of funny, we don't know why sometimes, but we just say, well, these plants like this. I get my best roses when I've got this in this area here, and then you find out the water you have has a lot of sodium in it, and first thing you know, you're getting good blooms, kind of, but you don't really know why they do that. So again, you always hear me come back. You can't fertilize if you don't know what you're missing or what's there and what's not there. So you have to have some knowledge of what is actually there. And with those things, they will really help you pick out those things that you need. But if you want something like a root crop, a lot of times, potato is a good example. It'll grow a vine and a good fibrous rootstock, but it won't be bulking the actual potatoes until well down the line. And it'll be a storage unit and a sink for potassium, phosphate, and many other good vitamins and nutrients that are stored late, well after the plant has come out. And not many people look at the potato bloom, but it's a beautiful flower and a beautiful bloom, but has no significance in your farming practice. So it isn't indicative that the plant's doing healthy, and that's a good sign, but it's really bulking up those potatoes, adding the nutrients that will do that. And most of those things, most of those rooted crops react the same way. Is the root itself is something that will determine not what the plant wants to do, but what we want. Another good example, which is really rapid, if you don't have everything in a radish crop before you start, you'll never get enough into it. That radish matures in anywhere from 19 to 22 days or so from seed to harvest. So you have to have everything in place, or you're going to have not the structure you need in your roots and the firmness that you need. So that if you want that good cell structure, so it's not pithy or not kind of not really a firm cell to get massed together, you're probably not getting enough potassium into it. So all of these have their unique characteristics, But if you don't find out and make your analysis of what I'm trying to plant, and is this a good spot for it? Do I understand how to grow it for what I'm trying to get out of it? And then am I in the right place at the right time? And that's why the important things about feeding plants is feeding the proper nutrients, which we can find out almost in any book. But are we doing it at the right time? Or do we need root development first? Do we need crop maturity? Is that important? It's color, size, all of these things that go into it. Make a fertility plan for that crop. Also, are we giving it the right amounts? We imply we need a lot of nitrogen, but if we put it all on at one time, and a lot of it won't be there when the crop is able to take it up, meaning it will be converted to nitrate and leach through, which is not good for anybody. It's not good for the farmer or the gardener or anybody, because you spent money and lost it. It's not good for the environment because it can leach and continue to leach down and get into the groundwater. So all of that, understand how much you can put on at the right amount and at the right time. And the right next thing is the right place. If we have a plant that's planted on a hill and we're fertilizing down into the furrow, we're not getting to the mass of the roots. Most of those mass of that roots is going to be in that furrow, and not in the furrow, but up on the actual berm that we've planted our crop on. So that's where we've got to apply that. And we got to make sure it's the right crop for what we're trying to do. If we've got a vegetative crop, we probably want to put more nitrate to it and less ammonium. If we have a reproductive climate, we want more ammonium nitrate and nitrogen and less nitrate nitrogen. And then when we need vegetative growth out of these, say, long-term crops, we convert from ammonium early on to nitrate later on. Many, many things to consider. But at the end of the day, if you're not asking your questions, if you're just planting a tree, you're planting a vine, you're planting a shrub, and it's out of place, you're not going to be happy with it. You're not going to be successful with it. And you're going to want to give up. When a lot of times, if we just would have had an alternative that we wanted, we would have filled that spot, or we would have filled that particular field with a crop that's just as valuable, or maybe even more valuable, understanding how to make it grow. So it's more of an art with a lot of science and understanding, and that's why farming is not always the easiest thing to do, and it's things that you learn little at a time and keep perfecting your craft, just like it is every time that you start anything. So I'm going to leave it there for now, but hopefully it gave you plenty of things to think about if you're going to be planning something, will it work or won't it work, and some ideas to separate so that you can do that. So until next time, stay curious.
Thanks for another absolutely fantastic episode of Agriculture in a Nutshell, Bill. I'm sure that everyone listening surely enjoyed all the different things you had to say about all the many different aspects to consider when trying to grow a crop. Make sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe, and always stay curious.